Welcome to Scale Her Up, the Female Entrepreneurs Show with me, Brenda Hector. I'm a business growth specialist helping female business owners to develop themselves and grow their businesses so they can achieve their goals and enjoy the lifestyle they dream of. I'm on a mission to revolutionise the entrepreneurial landscape for women in business. In every podcast episode, I interview someone who has an inspiring story or some great advice for women aiming to start or scale their businesses. If you're new to the show, take a moment to subscribe right now so you don't miss any upcoming episodes, and please check out the previous ones after listening to this one. We've got an awesome Facebook community. Just search for Scale Her Up and join in. I'm delighted today to have Sophy Green from Instant Neighbour join me. Sophy, thank you very much for being on the show.
You're very welcome.
If anyone's not familiar with Instant Neighbour, will we start off by explaining what it is that...
Yeah, it's not a short explanation, so my apologies there, because we are a relatively complex organisation. Instant Neighbour is just over 40 years old and was started by two ministers in Holborn West Church with the aim of helping single young men get jobs. Within about a year and a half, 2 years, they realised you couldn't get a job if you didn't have an address. Changed the sort of focus of the charity to help people set up, maintain a home, and on the back of that, get employability. So we continue with that as part of our focus. We take in placements from various different organisations across the city, help people develop a skill to get themselves ready to get back to work if they've been out of work or get into their first job. We also run a food bank. We've been doing that for the whole 40 years as well, which is hugely busy and increasingly getting busy. I'm sure we'll cover that as time goes on. We've just launched our 35th Giving Tree appeal. We get names and ages of children from across the Northeast. We put that on gift tags. Organisations, shopping centres, etc., take the gift tags, put them onto their trees. People take a gift tag, buy a gift, give it back to us. We then sort them and get them distributed to the various different organisations in time for gifts to be given to children to open on Christmas Day. Last year, we gave out about 13,500 Christmas presents to about 4,000 kids. And we're probably going to do about the same sort of stuff this time round. We are a social enterprise as well as a charity. We are about 85 to 90% income generating, so we don't rely on any government grants for any of the work we do. We generate our own funds. We do that through our physical shop that we have at our premise in St Margaret Drive, and an online shop which we launched in 21, which I'm sure we'll cover again later on as well, which is doing very well. So we have that. We also have our own joinery service. I have a fully qualified joiner who goes out and will do any kind of joinery work for anybody. We try to keep the rates per hour of that as low as we possibly can so it's available to everybody on low income. And he'll do anything from fit a cat flap, put a bookshelf to fitting a kitchen and that kind of stuff. He works across all sort of side of stuff. We also have a carpet service. You can buy new carpet from us and we have a carpet fitter who'll lay it for you. And again, all of these services are about trying to help people maintain a home. We have two major contracts, one with Aberdeen City Council and one with Aberdeenshire Council. So we collect, store and redeliver the goods of tenants who are evicted from their properties for whatever reason. And we've had the contract with Aberdeen City for over 20 years. And the Shire, this is our first contract with them. We've had that for nearly 4 years now. And literally on Friday, the retendering information came out for both those contracts. So we're about to do a huge piece of work in retendering for both of those contracts. And I said, in amongst all of this, we offer volunteer opportunities and skills development opportunities. And I have to say, I'm very proud of my 22 members of staff. 9 of them come from within our service users, people who have come to us historically. I think that's probably enough of us.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. I say we're not a straightforward organisation. There's not one thing we do, although as I say, it is focused around trying to help people set up and maintain a home and become ready to work, or if they've been out of work for a long time, help them stabilise their lives again.
There's a lot in there. I'm familiar.
Yeah.
I thought I was familiar with Instant Neighbour, but there's a lot in there that I didn't know that you did, and I didn't know the origins of the organisation. So that's really interesting. How long have you been part of Instant Neighbour?
21 years. It's a long time. When you think about it like that, it's 21 years. A long time.
And your role is
Chief Executive.
Yeah. And is that the role you took 21 years ago? Or
Yes. It's interesting to me because I've spent nearly all of my career working in the third sector. And prior to working with Instant Neighbour, I was a Scotland director for an organisation called Common Purpose, which is a leadership development organisation, works across, it's international as well as UK. It takes people from the public, private, voluntary sector who are about to get to the top of their career and helps them broaden back out their perspective and understand the impact of any decision making they make on their local community and society as a whole. So I did that for nearly 6 years. But interestingly, I was getting very tired because I had to be in London about 3 times a month. And I was running offices in Edinburgh, Glasgow, Dundee, Perth, Stirling, and Aberdeen, and was hardly ever at home. So I eventually, I suppose, I lost a bit of my social connections because I'd be invited to stuff that was always in the wrong city. If that makes sense. That whole, when you're running a fairly large organization, you can find yourself somewhere disconnected in some ways from what your home environment is. So I decided I wanted to change what I was doing. And interesting, you were talking earlier on about coaching, and that I spent about a year and a half working with a coach to help me decide what I wanted to do long term. And you'll probably know this book, What Colour is Your Parachute? And I worked through process of looking at the exercises within What Colour is Your Parachute. And it helped me to determine the level of role I wanted to go for, the kind of working environment I wanted to be in, a whole bunch of stuff. It's like you are in the middle of a flower. So you're the center of the flower, and then you work around these different petals all the way around it, which helps you fill in what it is you want to do. And at the end of all of that, the job at Instant Neighbour just happened to be advertised. And I realised I had wanted to work in something in the northeast of Scotland, which is my home place, at a very senior level, with a smallish organisation I could make a huge difference with. So it just, I don't know if what's the right word, serendipity, is that the right word? It just all slotted together at the right time for me. Tells you how I got to be at Instant Neighbour.
Awesome. And effectively, the chief executive of an organisation is the same as I would interview a lot of business owners, the ones that are the decision makers at the top of the organisation, although I guess you'll have a board.
Yeah, I do. I have a board. Quite interestingly, and it's one of the things about working with a board that I have, again, I think most of my career there's been a board involved in some form or another. And I think in most organisations, even if you're setting up on your own, at some point you'll require some sort of support and input from others. So to build yourself, even if it's not a board, but a support mechanism that actually helps you decide how to do things or offers you advice or even listens to just moaning, it's quite a useful tool to have. So yes, I respond to a board, but I have quite actively, and I think the better to describe it, because I've been chairs of boards previously as well, and I'm a nose in, hands off, is my view of how a board should be.
I like that. They
should know what you're up to and should be supportive of that, but they shouldn't be trying to do the daily stuff. If that makes sense. They need to allow you to get on with doing the job of running the business, but being in the background so you can call on them when it's needed. So for instance, an example would be right now, as I said, we're about to retender for our contracts with the local authorities. My board will be supportive of that role. And he literally stood down as my chair earlier this year, but he's coming back in to help do the commercial side of that tendering work alongside myself. Because he and I have done it now. This will be our third go at tendering together. From that point of view, I think it's very useful to build that sort of support network. And I've tried within my board to have skills within I can't afford to pay for by having staff, if that makes sense. So finance director, because I obviously have an accounts manager, etc., but my finance director is on my board. I have HR, and I have an employment judge on my board, that kind of support side of stuff, public health, that kind of side of stuff, IT skill set, all of that. So stuff that I can't afford to pay for to have on my staff, I've got on the board.
Brilliant. I love that. I love that strategy. Yeah.
It's taken me a while to get there.
You touched on it when you did your introduction there. In the lifetime of Instant Neighbour, there's been quite a change. In the time that you've been there, you'll have seen a lot of change. Is there an increase in the demand for the service that you provide?
Yes, and it's interesting for me because I had the naive thought that I'd be able to work myself out of a job. I had this idea that society would get itself sorted enough that we didn't need organisations like Instant Neighbour. But demand is just, particularly in our food bank, between August and September, demand at the food bank went up by over 8%, which doesn't sound like very much. But if you think about, we were having about 30 people a day coming to us, so it's getting up over 40 now, looking for support with food because people are just struggling. The cost of living crisis, everybody will know that. When you go to the shops, everything's getting more and more expensive. So yes, demand for our services is increasing. And I'm an external advisor to the Anti-Poverty and Inequality Committee with Aberdeen City Council. And across the board, demand is growing for support to get out of having to choose to heat or eat. And that is definitely happening. And a number of people coming to us are working and they're still not managing. We have a benefit system that isn't working either. Sadly, it's the aims of looking after people are there. But one of the things that's quite interesting me I've reflected on over the time is that when I first started working on this area, it was called social security. I actually wanted to keep people secure. We've now changed the terminology to a benefit, and you might be entitled to it, you might not. And there's a subtle change in people's thought process about what we've decided as a world we want to do. Do we want to support people and keep them secure, or do we want to say you can have that as a benefit or not? And there's an element of me that tries very hard within the work at Instant Neighbour is not to make the judgment, if that makes sense, so that actually if somebody comes to us for help, do not judge them because you've no idea why they might be in the situation they're in and how quickly it can happen. It's very clear that a number of people, and actually a large number of people, have less than 3 months worth of savings in their bank account. So if you were to become redundant suddenly, and or if you're in a relationship partnership, both of you become redundant, you can lose your home very quickly.
Yeah.
Very quickly. So there's an element of that people live up to the maximum of their income and beyond in some situations. So it's a scenario across Aberdeen that is increasing. People are becoming less well off, I think is best. But I don't think it's unique to Aberdeen. I think it's a UK-wide thing, to be honest.
Yeah, I think so too. So too. And does that cost of living crisis or whatever and the increased demand for your services, does that also affect the ability to raise funds?
Oh, yes. It's interesting. There's a group of charity CEOs who get together, and we were together fairly recently, and you'll have seen the announcements from VSA about how they're struggling. And I know that it's really interesting. During COVID, which people don't really want to go back to, but there was a benchmark for us as in the charity sector. During COVID, lots and lots of services were diverted and provided through charitable organisations. And we were funded very well at that point to deliver services. Since that, the funding has dramatically dropped away. And because of the cost of living, people are giving less to charity, entirely reasonably, because you have to look after yourself first. Pardon me, but so funders are telling us all in the charitable sector that what's happening is they're getting increased numbers of applications for funds. So what they're trying to do in some situations is give less money to more people. But that then creates its own challenge, and you're spending a large part of your time thinking about how you're going to fund your work. As I said at the beginning of this, as an organisation, and my deliberate choice is for us to be more income generating than grant reliant, but we still absolutely rely on donations, financial donations, and trusts and grants to foundations to support our work. We couldn't survive without that. You get to the critical points in time where earlier this year I made the decision to close. We had another shop on Great Western Road underneath the 7 incorporated trades. I had to take some difficult decision to close that because it was becoming not financially viable to keep it going. And on the back of that, I had to reorganise our retail team, and I lost a member of staff on the back of the reorganisation, which is a horrible thing to do. But since I've been at Instant Neighbour, when I started with Instant Neighbour, we had a staff of 6. And throughout my time, we've grown and shrunk and grown and shrunk and grown and shrunk. Partly driven and mainly driven by the needs of the business, if that makes sense. So I've had to take some pretty tough decisions over the time I've been with the organisation to maintain services to our client service users. We want to maintain that. And sometimes that makes the choice of what you have to do within the staffing side of stuff more challenging and more difficult. And that's not an easy thing to do. One of the things I am very conscious of, that whilst my organisation is a charity, it is a business. And it has to wash its face. We have to make sufficient money in order to keep us going. And one of the issues running a charity still remains that people think, I still occasionally get asked if I get paid and do I work full time? Yeah, yes, and yes, I have to get paid. And the charity itself can't do anything for free. We cannot, because nothing in life is free. We have buildings to pay for, vehicles to pay for, national insurance contributions to pay, pensions to pay, all that kind of stuff. So it's a really interesting world to work in the third sector. People don't necessarily understand. They think that charities get everything for free. Yes, we get volunteers that come and help us, but you shouldn't have a volunteer doing a job that somebody should be paid for. It should be a support to that role, not separate.
And I guess it must be difficult because you must be a caring person to work in the third sector. You must be doing it because you care about people and the impact that you're having. So then having to make those difficult decisions, cutting jobs and things like that, well, all leadership is about making difficult decisions, I think.
Yeah.
That must be really hard.
It's something I find, I do find it really tough to do that. And yes, I hope I'm a caring person.
Of course you
I
are.
really enjoy my job, and I have a great team of people that work around me. And over the years, I'm very lucky to have had a great number of great folk working for me, and also volunteers. So I was coming up in the bus back from the middle of town on late Friday afternoon, and one of our old volunteers got on, and we just sat and yapped away. She's no longer volunteering for us, but you still have those connections with people who have worked there. A young guy that came to us, I'm just saying about 15, 16 years ago, had to do a community payback order, who then became a volunteer, then became a member of staff, and now lives abroad and works abroad. Whenever he's in Aberdeen, comes in to say hello and continues to do some bits and pieces of work for us in the background on a voluntary basis whenever he can. Those connections are very strong for me. But yes, it's not easy to have to get, but you have to think about the long-term sustainability of the business. I can't afford for personally emotional stuff to get too much in the way. You have to think about it. And when you're making a role redundant, you have to be very strong about making sure that the communication about why you're having to restructure is there for the whole team. I try to have fairly regular meetings with the whole team. So on a Tuesday morning, we'll quite often get together, all of us, about 8:30, just for half an hour or so. And most of the time, that's me letting them know what I've been up to, because as the head of an organisation, you're quite often invisible. You know what I mean? Because I do work from home 2 days a week. I'm in the office 2 days and work from home 2 days a week. And so when they can always clearly think, what on earth is she doing? Is she doing anything? So I like to let them know what I've been up to. So I'll tell them about this, that I've been talking to yourself, and let them know what's happening with the tender, etc., that it's out now, because obviously that has potential impact within the whole organisation. If we don't retain those contracts, then I'll have to do even more restructuring, which I don't want to have to do. But your question about the pain, it is that pain. You feel guilty, you feel heartbroken at times about having to change the organisation or restructure. And because you then question whether or not you could have done something differently about the funding, or was there something else that could have happened. Interesting one, we launched our online shop, and we launched that during COVID. But we had been realised before that, about 2 years before that people's shopping habits were changing.
Yes.
So we had the retail outlets, the shops, physical shops, but people were starting to buy more and more stuff from home. So we were very fortunate during COVID. We managed to work with support from an organisation called Just Enterprise that helps social third sector organisations, and a guy there that came along and worked with us to develop the online shop, which we were then able to launch, because obviously everything was online anyway, wasn't it? So it worked quite well for us. And it's growing in strength and strength. There are obviously challenges with our online shop in that we only ever have one of anything. We're not like any of the big shops you could go to and order and you'll be able to get it in 6 weeks type stuff, because they're just making it. We just have one. So our online shop requires quite a bit of management to remove stuff as soon as it's purchased, etc., that kind of stuff. But no, it's really, so it is that trying to have it's the future proofing. This is part of what the restructuring can be about. And it's also about looking at the organisation as a whole and trying to think of trends, what's happening. You know what I mean? So that launching the online shop was part of our considering what the future is going to look like. And it's an example would be for me quite an interesting one. We used to advertise on radio quite a lot. And I had some young folks through YPI. I don't know if people know about the Youth Philanthropy Initiative through the Wood Foundation. And teenagers in about 5th, 6th year at secondary schools, are asked to work with a charity to draw up and design some sort of program for them, or some fundraising or event or whatever. And they're then judged, and your charity can win £3,000. So we had a group of young folk come in, and they were chatting away to us about what we were doing, and and they asked us about advertising. How do you advertise? And I said, we're advertising the radio. And I said, actually, I think it was North Sound original. I said, I advertised in original 106. What's that? And I said, it's North Sound. What's that? I said, it's like Radio 1. And they said, oh, we don't listen to the radio. And it just suddenly crossed my mind that these are customers of the future and they're not listening to the radio. So we need to, and the reason that I'm raising this is to try and recognize that things change and we can't stand still. So actually, as a leader of an organization, one of my challenges is to try and stay in touch with what's happening going forward, to have that sort of horizon scanning type stuff. One of the things I always really enjoy is we had a couple of interns working with us this year through university and through Aberdeen Works, is somebody new coming in and spending a bit of time doing the helicopter stuff, like doing stuff like this with yourself. It makes me stop and think.
Yeah.
I think pressing the pause button every so often and taking a step away from your organization if you can to try and look at it from an external point of view or ask others to look at it for you and ask you the relevant questions is really important in terms of leading.
It's part of what I do actually, is to come in and ask questions and just check, why are you doing it like that? What's the purpose? And not that my question is that I think that you shouldn't be doing it like that, but I think it's important that you do reflect on, is that still the right way to do it? And yeah.
And it's also that other point about just because you've tried something that hasn't worked in the past doesn't mean it can't work now, because the world is changing and evolving all the time.
Well, and also there's lots of things that did work in the past that are not working now. And there's a lot of business owners who are quite frustrated, or business leaders frustrated because it was working and now it's not.
Yeah. But it's easy to get stuck. It is easy to get stuck because it's also about, and not about, when I say that easy to get stuck, it's an element of calmness, I suppose, an element of that, if that makes sense. So if your business was doing reasonably well, why would you upset the apple cart? That makes sense. Yeah. But there's an element for me actually that if you don't upset the apple cart, you're going to stay doing that same thing and nothing will ever change and you might actually get stuck. So it's an element of trying to look forwards and backwards and all that. And it's not easy as a leader to do that. And also the other challenge then is taking people with you when you're trying to do that. And
the comfort zone's a dangerous place for a business.
Yeah.
But it's a comfortable place for a team.
Yes. And also for a leader at times, if things are going along pretty well, why on earth would you want to do it to upset that? Yeah. Except actually, if you don't look at, going back to the point about the helicopter view and somebody externally coming in and asking the question, you might not realize that it's going to go wrong until too late if you don't spend a bit of time reflecting on how.
And I guess that's the benefit of your nose in board.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. They ask the questions and the justification. And most of the time it's about the money, let's be perfectly honest. But why are you doing that? Which is fine. But
tell me about Sophy then. What have you learned about? Obviously, you went through a bit of soul searching before you took the role in an Instant Neighbour, determining what you wanted to do. But what have you learned about Sophy over the years?
It's quite an interesting question, actually, because one of the things I have tried to do is to understand myself more. So I did the Cranfield University High Performance Leadership course, which I really enjoyed. And that is largely about what you just asked me. What do you learn about yourself and what motivates you and how do you manage yourself in certain situations? I think what I've learned about myself is that, gosh, it's always that sort of, I think that's a challenging question to answer, because what you like to think is that you're really good at everything you do and that the world round about you as an individual works really well. And if something goes wrong, it's nothing to do with you, it's because somebody else has mucked it up, not you. But actually, I think one of the things I have learned to be conscious of, if it's my head or my heart that's driving what I'm doing. Going back to your point about restructuring and if it's challenging or difficult to get rid of people or do stuff, you have to allow yourself the opportunity that at times your heart might get in the way of what your head's telling you. But is that what's driving my decision making? And in a business context, it can't be your heart that allows you to decide fully. You need to have some cognizance of your personal feelings and your personal well-being in amongst it all. But you have to be very aware of your head. I think one of the things I learned, going back to my point about doing the coaching session, was that whilst I quite enjoyed, to a certain extent, being at the top of an organisation that was UK-wide and international, etc., that the strains of that are pretty drastic on you as an individual. And there is no glamour in getting the red eye to London on a regular basis and then coming home late in the evening and being exhausted. There isn't any glamour, no matter what anybody says in it. You might get paid reasonable amount of money, but I took a fairly significant salary cut when I came out of that job. But that was, as I said, doing all of that work. Self-reflection. It's an interesting one for me because it's going to sound like it was. I realised actually that I was married at that time. I realised that I was married to the wrong person. We'd been together for over 20 years. And don't get me wrong, I'm still very fond of them. We have 3 beautiful daughters together who are now grown up adults with their own kids. But it made me think and reflect on my whole life. It was part of the coaching side of stuff. So me as an individual, I realised that I had given of me to everything else apart from me. So I had not spent enough time looking after myself. I'd spent lots of time looking after my children and my marriage and all that sort of stuff, day in, day out. But I hadn't actually spent enough time thinking about what I wanted out of life. So I split up from my husband. And that was after that, to be fair. I'd started with Incinerator at that point, but it was just a whole reflection process. So I've learned that looking after yourself is very important. And I've gotten better at that over the years. I've also learned, as I said, about understanding and listening to which is driving you, your head or your heart, in any situation, not just in a work situation, but outside of work. I've learned that what I dislike in people are people who are false, if that makes sense. And I've learned that I like to surround myself with people who challenge me in terms of thought process. I'm quite happy and comfortable to be challenged. I am also quite good at considering how I can respond to something, not an immediate response. It's quite interesting. I've said this. I'm now remarried, by the way, and have been for 16 years. But one of the things I'm conscious of as well is reflecting back on what you've done and trying to figure out, but also not rushing at making a decision. I used to be far more black and white. I used to be, this is the right route and that's the wrong route. But I've actually learned that sometimes that can get in the way of actually taking time to consider whether or not that's the right decision to make. Should have that answering your question, to be honest with you. So a big grab.
No, that's brilliant. A number of answers there. Interesting that you're talking about doing something for making decisions for you and doing the right thing for you. That's an ongoing theme. A number of clients and a number of people I know, might be a women of a certain age, suddenly going, yeah, what about me now? Yeah, that's.
And it might actually be because when I think about it, it's when my youngest daughter was about 16, 17 at that point. So they had no longer, that sounds awful, I don't mean they no longer require me, because they still do, and I love them to death, but they don't require you in the same way.
Yeah.
So I think that's when and it's an interesting when people say with the empty nest thing, and whether or not that's the time you start reflecting and everything. And it wasn't quite that for me, but because I had been doing that work with my coach, it all came together, if that makes sense. And part of the work with the coach and also the high performance course I did was about thinking about yourself. But that's not about being selfish. That's just allowing the fact that you have not done that. And when you were saying about being a caring person, actually, it is an element of that as well, isn't it? You find yourself caring for others, that you spend time doing that. And at some point, you have to think about me.
Put your own oxygen mask on first, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
You'll be able to care for others and to do the job well unless you're in a good place yourself.
Yes, and I think that's really important. But it sounds such an easy thing to do, but it's not an easy thing to do. It's very challenging to do that. And I think your podcast about leadership and entrepreneurship and developing businesses to allow people to be the best they can be, it's quite an interesting one for me, because I have never had the ambition to grow Instant Neighbour into a huge organisation.
No?
Oh, no, because I don't see the need for that. And my desire for Instant Neighbour is to do what it does really well. And if we can do that really well without having to grow into a massive thing, but continue to support the community in the Northeast, then that's what my ambition for Instant Neighbour is. My ambition is I said at the beginning of this, to stop having to be around, to stop being needed. Truthfully, it has to be that.
And I suppose as maybe society's changing and people are needing your service, you've had to grow to meet the demand.
Yes.
But
it's also, it's that part of it, but it's also in recognition of service users will ask you, what about doing X, Y, and Z? Could you provide this kind of service on it? And you have to reflect whether or not that's an important enough bit. But I also think remaining to the core of what your business is about, for me, is because there has been recently, there's been lots of funding for different elements of work that Instant Neighbour could go off to do. So we could apply for a grant to go and do a piece of, there's all this stuff around about mental health, stuff at the moment, counselling and that kind of stuff. We do offer support in terms of people's mental health, but it's not a specific project. I could get funds in place to do that. I could do that for 2 or 3 years, then the funds go. So you can set yourself up to be doing something. And I've been very conscious of us as an organisation, and with my board's support, not to dive off into doing something that's not part of what Instant Neighbour was set up to do.
We call it shiny object syndrome. And it's really easy for a business owner or a leader to go, oh, that would be a good thing to do, and go off and do that. And it distracts them from, So
but it's an interesting one.
Why and your purpose. It's easier to make decisions not to follow the shiny objects as well.
I couldn't agree more. And it goes back to that point about the online shop. But one of the reasons we did that, but we'd spent a long time researching it in advance whether or not it was going to be a reasonable route to go down. But yes, absolutely, the shiny object. I like that analogy a lot, actually. Yeah, and it would be easy as an organisation to do that. Just go to that.
I'm thinking, Sophie, there's been a great chat. There's been lots of things that you've said that I'm sure will resonate with if somebody is thinking of starting a business or thinking of making a change, and some of what you've said around being clear on what you want to do and looking after yourself and making decisions for what's the right thing for you. If we've sown in a seed or two there, I think that's brilliant. A bit great around having to change and surrounding yourself with the people that can help you. For example, your board. That's brilliant.
Can I just say though, one thing for that, actually, that I think one of the best things I have done is to have had a coach. And I would say that's
the best thing you could say to me. That's fantastic.
But I would genuinely mean that. I think it goes back to, I've also done counselling in the past as well. And I think one of the best things you can ever do is allow yourself the opportunity to speak to somebody that's not close to you, that has a completely impartial point of view, will ask you challenging questions, but allow you the opportunity to then reflect. And we don't have that enough. So I would recommend, and I'm not doing it because it's you, Brenda, but I would recommend coaching to everybody.
I'm going to jump on that comment then and just say, I am a business coach. I'm here to help businesses grow. And if anybody wants to talk to me, you can book the link in the bio or whatever. There's always a complimentary session with me if you need it, or whoever. I think every business, every leader and every business should have a coach, and that not enough people or organizations are utilizing that, because it works for all the sports people. We should implement it in business as well.
Absolutely. I agree.
Yeah. What I was going to ask you then, Sophie, is here we are, mid-November, and the run up to Christmas. Is there anything that people can do to get involved to support Instant Neighbour? Do all those toys, all those gifts that have been donated need sorting, or
yes, I have
to help?
Yes, if they want to go onto our website, the volunteer timetable is going live from today. So if they'd like to access our website, instantneighbour.co.uk. Yes, we're looking for volunteers to help sort with that. Yeah, fantastic. And let's be clear, if you are changing out any of your furniture and you'd like to donate it to us, please do phone and get in touch with us. Just, there are certain things we cannot take, but you'll be unsurprised to hear that. Things with scratches, rips, all that kind of stuff. They have fire safety labels on if they're soft furniture. But we would be delighted to receive people's donations as well, because that helps us fund the work that we're doing. And the Christmas thing, please help. Give us some selection boxes. We always try to give out selection boxes with the gifts as well. And money.
Yeah.
I'll say the money word.
Don't be ashamed to ask, because that's what keeps our charity going. Absolutely.
Absolutely, yeah. Like I said earlier on, we don't do things for free. I have to pay for it. One of our challenges is always getting funds towards our core costs, to be honest with you, paying for staff and that kind of stuff, because people prefer to fund a particular project, which I understand, don't get me wrong. I think it's entirely a normal reaction from folk, but actually I still need money to pay bill, electricity, gas, all that kind of stuff. Negotiate them down. I have a very good office manager who's fantastic, and an accounts manager who's like a terrier, but making sure that money comes in, etc., and gets us the best deals for everything. I think that would be it, Brenda. I don't want to ask for too much. Just think about Instant Neighbour whenever you can.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'll be donating some selection boxes, definitely.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much.
Maybe some time as well. I'll check when you need people.
Yeah.
Sophie, it's been an absolute pleasure. We've talked way longer than we intended to be. It must have been good. Thank you so much for
You're very welcome.
being on the show. And thank you to you for listening to Scale Her Up, the Female Entrepreneurs Show. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes, and join the Facebook community at Scale Her Up. Connect with me on social media. Drop me a message to let me know if you're enjoying the podcasts. And I'll finish by reminding you that only 1 in 3 UK entrepreneurs are female, and men are 5 times more likely to scale their business to over £1 million in turnover than women are. When we start and scale our businesses to the same extent as men, it will add £250 billion to the UK economy, provide millions of jobs, and I would imagine help with the impact that Instant Neighbour is having. Ladies, you can do it and make a massive difference.